Now, as COVID cases continue to rise steadily in Europe, Germany's health minister has issued a stark warning saying that the current restrictions in place will not be enough to stop a new COVID wave. Let's listen in.
Aber die Schutzmaßnahmen, die wir derzeit nutzen, die der Delta-Welle ja quasi erfolgreich begegnen, diese Maßnahmen werden nicht reichen, einen deutlichen Anstieg der Omikron-Fälle zu verhindern. Auch ich wünsche Ihnen einen guten Übergang ins neue Jahr. Sind Sie bitte vorsichtig und bis zur nächsten Gelegenheit. Vielen Dank Ihnen.
This warning comes a day after Germany imposed further restrictions. Nightclubs are now shut. Sporting events will be held without an audience. Private gatherings limited to 10 vaccinated people. All these rules come after Germany significantly tightened rules over the unvaccinated who have been barred from shops, restaurants, cultural events. But the health minister thinks that these restrictions are not enough. While Germany is currently reporting a falling trend in daily new infections, the health minister remains skeptical of the figure, saying that the true number cases is not being reflected since fewer tests are being done over the Christmas holiday season. Therefore, chances are that the real incidence rate is 2 to 3 times more than the current rate. Meanwhile, several hundred people took to the streets of Munich on Wednesday, all calling for an end to restrictions against the unvaccinated. The protesters walked through the streets, followed by the police. The surge, currently the worst in Europe, is forcing governments to walk a tightrope between imposing restrictions to stop governments from becoming overwhelmed and a need to keep their economies open 2 years after the virus first emerged. And for more on this, WION correspondent Trent Murray is joining us live from Berlin. Trent, thank you so much for joining us. Can you start by telling us about the situation on ground in Germany?
Well, what we are seeing in the official data is that cases are starting to fall just a little bit. But that data comes with a very big grain of salt because the health minister here says he expects that there is significant underreporting because of the Christmas break. In other words, in a number of regions across Germany, health officials may have taken a few days off and stopped reporting cases accurately. And as you said, he believes that the actual incidence rate across Germany could be 2 to 3 times higher than the official data shows. You only really have to look at Germany's neighbours to get an idea of why he thinks that. So in the past 24 hours, Germany reported around 42,000 new COVID-19 cases. Heading west to France, well, they reported over 200,000. Quite a discrepancy there, and it's worth remembering Germany is a much bigger country than France population-wise. So clearly it underscores the fact that there is probably not accurate data being put out by health officials in some regions. For that reason, the health minister here is very cautious about the coming New Year's Eve.
Absolutely. Right, Trent. In fact, I was just going to come to that. He's warned that these current restrictions may not be enough. So what other measures can we expect, if any?
Well, in the immediate term, there will be a really big cap on those New Year's Eve celebrations. Those big kind of iconic scenes that we're used to seeing at that Brandenburg Gate behind me will all but be cancelled. Crowds are being told not to come and celebrate in public. And if you are having a private party, well, you'll need to make sure you don't have more than 10 guests, because if you do, you'll be in breach of the rules. And all of those 10 guests need to be vaccinated. If you have one unvaccinated guest, well, the cap goes right down. You can only have 2 households meeting. On top of that, we are seeing a number of closures, things like nightclubs and discotheques being closed. I think in the new year, most controversially, there will be legislation starting to be prepared possibly for mandatory vaccinations. About 71% of the German population has received both of their vaccines. The government would like to see that higher, and for a long time they've been trying to convince people to get their shots, but it seems in the new year they will be looking at compelling them to do that with some form of new mandate.
Right. Now, speaking of the unvaccinated people, there have been protests demanding the restrictions on the unvaccinated to be lifted. What can you tell us about that and about what is being done to overcome vaccine hesitancy?
Well, what we are seeing is an increase in some of these public protests that are taking place in big cities like Munich and here in Berlin, and they are becoming more common and they are increasingly becoming violent at times. There are often flare-ups now with police. I mean, a couple of nights ago we saw 10 police officers injured in Brandenburg, the state which surrounds Berlin, and the police union here has said that these increased protests are in many ways draining their resources, taking them away from their other duties that they need to be doing around this time of year. So it is a difficult balancing act for the government here because yes, they want to convince people to come and get their vaccinations, they want to convince them to follow the rules and to do the right thing, but they also know that they do need to be tough with these types of public protests because in some cases there can be unrest, there can be violence, and of course nobody wants to see that.
Right, absolutely. Trent, thank you so much for joining us with all the updates on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.